Before the fall of Earth, Aperture Science was regarded as one of the best scientific facilities in the world. However, just like the Black Mesa Research Corporation, there were secrets hidden away from the public. Secrets that could have had an immense impact on the rest of the world if they were revealed. Deep underground in the test shafts of Aperture's earlier years of experimentation, there were hundreds of sealed-off areas, hidden away from the eyes of the government, tombs of the participants inside. Aperture Science had extremely dark secrets, and because of the CEO, Cave Johnson's need to preserve his image and continuation of his scientific endeavors, the victims of these and the tales of their demise were left to gather dust. What made these tests so horrendous that their chambers were sealed away? What was the worst, and do any of these experiments mirror our reality? In this video, we explore the lore and story behind Aperture's secret experiments. Way before the construction of the Enrichment Center and the creation of GLaDOS, miles underground, Aperture Science made use of several test shafts to experiment with and study science. They built these huge spheres from the ground up towards the surface, and as these spheres got closer to the top, the decade in which they had been crafted changed with them. The lowest spheres were created in the 1950s and the latest in the 1980s. Each sphere was once highly populated by test subjects and Aperture personnel, but now each one is abandoned. Specifically, Test Shaft 09, codenamed Zulu Bunsen, in which the lowest region was sealed off on the 15th of June 1961. With a warning that the enrichment spheres beyond the blocked-off entrance may contain unsafe quantities of cosmic ray spallation elements, these being radioactive elements and isotopes. Cave Johnson had a huge distrust of the government and a belief that Black Mesa sent in spies into his facility to steal Aperture knowledge. So, whether this warning was real or whether it was an attempt to keep undesirables out is unknown. Regardless, in the abandoned bowels of the Aperture facility, dark secrets still remained of what had happened in this condemned region. The darker test chambers had been sealed away. However, recorded messages outside of them still described the horrors within, and additional pre-recorded messages from Cave Johnson still echoed across the region for only the ghosts to hear. These messages had been recorded by the CEO to welcome in and guide the astronauts, Olympians, and war heroes who had been invited to this grand facility to, as Cave Johnson described it, do science. In the 50s, Aperture's reputation was at an all-time high for the products they sent out into the world, thanks to their extremely high standards and vigorous testing procedures. Although now, the vitrification order suggests not to look at, ingest, or engage in conversation with any substance inside of Test Shaft 09. This area with sealed-off chambers and concreted doorways was a hub of activity to excited testing participants. As they departed from an elevator from the surface, they were welcomed in by the recordings of Cave Johnson, as thousands of tests were performed every day in the enrichment spheres. He could not personally oversee every one of them, and these messages had been made to cover any questions they may have had. They were then welcomed in by Aperture personnel and offered access to a relaxing welcome lobby as the staff here studied ongoing experiments and their results. Each one of these highly valued subjects had a different assignment, and as each one waited for theirs, this lobby offered information about Aperture's history and accomplishments. Unknown to them, as they waited for their assignments, an experiment had already begun. For the lucky or unlucky volunteer who sat in a folding chair, they were dosed with radiation as they sat there for 20 minutes. Cave or the science boys never explained how this was done, but it could be speculated that a concentrated radioactive source had been hidden in the seat of the chair. They had wanted to develop a tumor so that they could use science to remove it later in the enrichment spheres. For the rest of the participants, while they were lucky not to have been given this gift, they were put at risk of something else. Each science sphere had been constructed out of asbestos. This material had been used for a reason, to keep out rats. The side effects of this were felt for many years to come, as the test subjects who survived their experiments were put at risk of several serious diseases as they breathed in the fibers. These included lung conditions and cancers. Despite these issues, Cave believed that the pursuit of science was simply more important. Eventually, the subjects of astronauts, Olympians, and war heroes were given their assignments in one of the over 200 test chambers of this region. As so much time has passed since then, we only know of some of these experiments. Within these now vitrified chambers, the tests began. In one of these, the subjects were injected with praying mantis DNA. This experiment, however, went terribly wrong. The victims became a human mantis hybrid, and to deal with them, Cave created a new test. Those in the next batch of this experiment were told that instead of being injected with the DNA, they would fight an army of mantis men. Cave could have attempted to reverse this change, but his reputation was too important, and the death of the victims was preferable. In another chamber, the participants were given a reassuring message from Cave. In here, some of them had noticed that their blood was not blood anymore. Aperture had shot them with an invisible laser and it had turned their blood into pure gasoline. Just another one of Aperture's innovative ideas. Yet for the subjects, this would have been awful. For another batch, they were told that after their next series of tests, they should let an associate know if they needed to use the bathroom. Aperture had manipulated their bowel movements so that they excreted coal. Something that would have been incredibly painful. Luckily, he did say this was only temporary. If it lasted for over a week, Cave asked that they come back to Aperture to get it looked at, because that was not meant to happen. For one of the more dangerous and random experiments, the Aperture team decided to strap a test subject and point a superconductor turned up to full blast at them. Even Cave stated that they had no idea what this would do. They were just throwing science at the wall and seeing what stuck. The best case scenario? The subject would develop superpowers. The worst? Tumors, in which they could cut out. Out in the world during this period, Aperture had attempted to sell a weight loss aid, a sweet, slightly non-toxic form of fiberglass insulation that bounced ingested foods from the stomach back out of the mouth of the user. For various reasons, this was pulled from the shelves and Aperture was hit with lawsuits. As a result, this repulsion gel was implemented into the test chambers of Aperture. This was actually a great way to help test the first iteration of Aperture's portal device. The issue these subjects had was that the repulsion gel was lively, and whatever element it was made out of did not like the human skeleton. In around 1953, a test was introduced in which nanoparticles were put into the gel, and these little gizmos were designed to travel into the bloodstream of the subjects and pump experimental genes and RNA molecules into their tumors. Tumors that Aperture had likely given them. Over these years, many of the test subjects had fallen in these horrendous experiments, and Aperture had done their best to dispose of the evidence. Yet, in around 1956, they took more of an effort to reduce the casualty rate, and signs of safety procedures were set up around the spheres. Cave and his team did their best to at least increase the safety of their participants. He knew that great science was built on the shoulders of giants, but not at Aperture. He wanted to do all of his science from scratch with no hand-holding. The death of some of the participants was just a part of that. Moving forward to 1958, in another experiment, the control group of Kepler-7 were implanted with a tiny microchip around the size of a postcard into their skulls. The reason for this is unknown, but in normal Aperture fashion, there were side effects and consequences. One of them was warned by Cave. If the chip started to vibrate and beep during the duration of a test, they had heated up to around 500 degrees and would need to be removed pretty fast. In this abandoned 50s section of Aperture, it is interesting to think about how many ghosts linger here. How many people died because of Aperture's pursuit of science? Towards the later end of the 1950s, additional safety signs were displayed. These specifically about the dangers of time travel. Aperture had entered a new field of study, and they went into it just as they went into everything else, blind. The lab techs, however, did warn that if a participant did see a future or past version of themselves on the testing track, they should just move forward and not look back. Any eye contact or communication of any form with themselves could wipe out time itself. Despite the questionable, unethical, and quite frankly, incredibly dangerous experiments, Cave was happy with the progress these tests made. He just hated that these accidents not only cost the company money, but the investigations that came alongside them stopped their progress temporarily. Due to the deterioration of these lower levels of the Aperture facility, not every experiment that was performed down here is known. Time has taken them away. Those we know of are awful, but there may have been others that were not as bad. For the survivors and still willing participants, upon their completion of their testing track, they were thanked for their participation, offered the option to come back and test again, and then given access to an elevator to the surface. The 1950s had been kind to Aperture, but the 60s would change everything. As Aperture entered the late 1960s, Cave was upset that not only did his products fail to sell and were pulled from shelves due to safety concerns, but the US Senate had also discovered the disappearance of many of the testing participants. In 1968, the Senate questioned Cave about the missing astronauts. This put his activities essentially under a microscope, and the lack of sales eventually forced him to declare bankruptcy. Still, there was testing to be done of potential products in production, and without the ability to bring in astronauts, Olympians, and war heroes, Cave was forced to look elsewhere. The homeless population. Cave hated that he could not hire who he viewed as higher value test subjects. He was also not shy about voicing his disdain for them. From the pre-recorded messages in the 1970s spheres of Test Shaft 09, he described the phone book of a contract they were forced to sign in order to participate in return for $60 cash. In the waiting room, they were told to take a number and wait for their test to begin. This waiting area would have been full of eager participants, but Cave's messages of how they were not the best of the best, how their park benches were uncomfortable, and even not to smudge the glass would have removed any happiness they would have felt. Still, Cave knew that although he was being watched by the government and spied on by his competitors over at Black Mesa, he needed them and blurred the lines and attempted to see what he could get away with. As they sat in this waiting room, they were warned not to litter, loiter, or touch the glass. Signs also advised that if the personnel or subjects saw any of these, they should report what they had seen to their advisor. An Occupational Safety and Health Administration Inspector, a Department of Energy Inspector, a Government Accountability Officer, an Undercover Police Officer, Nuclear Regulatory Commissioner, Federal Emergency Management Agency Coordinator, an Ordinary Police Officer, a Journalist, Public Works Inspector, Mine Safety and Health Administrator Inspector, or a member of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, a member of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and a United States Marshal. In order to reduce costs and continue their operations, Aperture had to be very careful with what was seen from the public and the government. Just as they had done for decades, the personnel monitored the tests and their results from their offices, and within, horrendous experiments were conducted. Behind one of these sealed doors, an experiment had been conducted to turn the participant's blood into peanut water for a few minutes. This was Aperture's attempt to attain an award worthy or worth more than a Nobel Prize. Once again, this experiment would have been likely very painful to the participants, even worse if they had a peanut allergy. Further in, Cave believed that the average human male's water percentage of about 60% was too extravagant. To reduce this to around 20 or 30%, a test was designed to hit the participant with jet engines. This would not have ended well. It was in this region that Aperture also explored teleportation. One was horrendous. From what remains of the instructions of the intercom, it was clear that the experiment within attempted to move the participant from one place to another. However, the team had discovered that not all skin types moved with their bodies, something Cave claimed his team would help with if things went wrong. The other teleportation experiment was top secret, the Borealis. While the majority of these chambers were sealed behind doors, the events of the Borealis experiment had blown the door off of its hinges. Very little is known about what happened on this dry dock, but from the rumors the team at Black Mesa heard, they believed that the Borealis was a Healy-class icebreaker equipped with teleportation technology. At the conclusion of this test, the ship disappeared with the crew on board it. For those who survived their tests, they were given compensation vouchers to exchange for their $60. They also had the option to earn an additional $60 if they agreed to be pulled apart, had signed stuff put in them, and put back together. Once their forms were filled out, they were free to go. Aperture had fallen so far in the ruins of the 1970s region of this facility. The notes and recordings of only 4 of the experiments alongside the propulsion and repulsion gel tests can be found. Yet there were absolutely so many more lost to time. As Aperture entered the 1980s, their income had decreased even further, and Cave ordered that test participation become mandatory for all Aperture employees. The issue was that although he found that the quality of the test subjects had risen dramatically, employee retention had not. So he decided to phase out human testing completely, and in their place, robots. It was in this decade that many of the experiments went either undocumented, are now completely inaccessible, or are simply lost to time. All that is known is that Cave became deathly ill after his contact with moon rocks. These rocks, however, did create the perfect portal conductor when ground up. This gave Cave an idea, a test to see if jumping through these portals could somehow leach lunar poison out of a man's bloodstream. This was not successful. Other tests included AI generation and mapping the functionality of the human brain. These would later be used to create GLaDOS. These were the experiments of Test Shaft 09, at least what evidence remains of them after the area was abandoned, sealed away, built over, and thousands of years had passed. These asbestos-filled death traps were home to countless tests and experiments that severely mutilated and killed those who participated. Because of time and Cave's need to do science without interference, the details of the majority of these dark trials have been lost. This was just Test Shaft 09. At least 8 others existed with their own chambers and experiments. As of now, these sealed off chambers, bricked up doorways, and inaccessible regions are lost deep underground in Upper Michigan, never to be visited again, left alone to the ghosts of the victims who fell here. While I do cover Half-Life a lot more than I cover Portal, I will admit that I do love the darker themes of Portal a little bit more. Where else can I talk about someone being forced to shit coal, or tiny microchips that blow up brains? The exploration of Test Shaft 09 was one of the best parts of Portal 2. I did find the gel sections pretty repetitive, but Cave's recordings and pre-recorded messages outside of the sealed doors of chambers were pretty fascinating. I also enjoyed exploring this abandoned location as if it were one in the real world. There are probably locations like this in our world, but we'll never see them. With the lead up to Christmas, I have begun the next timeline, as I do every year. I have 2 planned, but we'll see if I manage to actually get both of them done. I am very excited to share them. That was everything I wanted to say. If you enjoyed this video, then I'd love you to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know in the comments below what you thought. Finally, I would like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Jonas, Lewis, Queen Arby, Fluffy the Dragon, Ruben Mendoza, Oren X, Azu, Comfy, Yali Rodriguez, 501st Clone Boy, Drakey Phoenix, Average Soul, Imperial Embers, Jimsy, Canufex, and Danu Cal Drawings. What was your favourite test? Was $60 enough to participate? And what would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. This is where our story ends. Check back soon for a new one.